A long time ago in a land far away, the disciples were ecstatic. I mean, Jesus had just fed probably 10,000 people. The Bible tells us there were 5,000 men there, plus women and children. And Jesus had done it out of a tiny little lunch. Now, during this time in Jewish history, the rabbis would teach that when the Messiah would come back, he would repeat the miracle of manna and would be able to provide food from nothing. And Jesus had just done that. And so the disciples were like, this is it. He is totally the Messiah. And the disciples weren't the only people who thought that. The multitude just knew now was the time to make Jesus king. They were out in the middle of nowhere. There were no Romans to stop them. They would set him up as king and march into the cities and start taking over. And then Jesus just ruins the mood. He says to the disciples, he sent them immediately into the boats across the lake. Like he shut the party down at the best part. He kicked the disciples out, and then he started sending away the crowd. And then he went up on a mountainside to pray. I mean, this was Jesus's moment. This is when he had the momentum and he could have become king. But Jesus didn't want to become king. He wanted to become our Savior. So the disciples are rowing across the lake, and what happens many times when we're disappointed is a storm hits. And so their hopes were shattered. They're frustrated with Jesus because he's not doing what they think he should be doing. Can you identify? And the storm hits, and then things are even worse. And this time in the storm, Jesus isn't with them. You see, they've been in storms before with Jesus, and Jesus just said, peace, and the storm stopped. But now they're by themselves. But what they didn't know was that Jesus was up on a mountainside praying for them. You see, many times when we're going through something tough and it feels like Jesus isn't there with us, he's actually praying for us, sending hope our way. Actually, he's walking on the water towards us. And there's a flash of lightning and they see him, but they think it's a ghost and they're even more scared. And Jesus says, take courage, meaning pick it up, grab courage. It's me. And here's a pattern that we keep seeing with this fearless on our, I think we're 34 days right now, is that Jesus says, don't be afraid, me. Like, don't be afraid, I'm here. Don't be afraid, look at me. Don't be afraid, I will fight for you. Over and over and over, Jesus says, don't be afraid, I'm here. And Peter, crazy Peter, impulsive Peter says, Lord, if it's you, I'm going to come out and walk to you. And we've talked about this story before, but Peter does the impossible until he looks at the wind. And I love that in the gospel here that we read, it said the wind. Because many times I think about the waves and the water, but it was the wind. Now, wind by itself in this storm wasn't deadly. We're not talking about a tornado here. Like, it's just the wind. Wind is something you can't see. Wind is something that you can feel and buffeted, but the wind symbolizes our imaginary fears. And when he focused on the imaginary fears instead of the very real Jesus, Peter started to sink. And he cries out, and immediately, Jesus grabs him and pulls him up. And then in the Gospels, Jesus says this very poetic, out-of-touch phrase. It's like, "Oh, ye of little faith." But actually, the Greek word for that phrase is one word. So it's like Jesus had a nickname for Peter, like little faith or small faith. You small fry faith. Oh, baby faith. Oh, little faith. And then he walks with Peter back and they get in the boat. And then immediately, again, the storm is over and they make it to the other side. I really want to talk a little bit about the little faith because, man, I can identify with Peter. Not necessarily the walking on water Peter, but the falling in the water and drowning overwhelmed Peter. And Jesus says to that Peter, to that Grant, to that you, oh, little faith. And like the question there is, why do you have such little faith? Jesus, at a wedding, before this story, had turned water into wine. And then when he told the disciples to feed them, instead of saying, okay, Jesus, what do we do? They said, it's impossible. And Jesus is like, all right, let me teach you. And he takes a little lunch and he feeds 10,000 people. And then Peter's walking on water. And then he starts to fall. And Jesus says, oh, little faith. And they get back up and they walk on water all the way back to the boat. You see, if we can have little faith, which I think all of us have little faith, why not make that big faith? I mean, really, what's the difference between a little faith and big faith? It's just a choice. And if God can help us with a little problem, why not a big problem? If God can use us to help one person, why not millions? If God can help us follow him on the water for a little bit, why not walk across the whole lake? You see, faith is such a hard word because it's so over-Christianized. Faith, it's this almost weak word. But faith is the doorway to the most adventurous, crazy, maxed out life you can have. Because when God says, hey, go talk to that person, faith is what gives you the confidence to say, all right, I'm going to go talk to that person. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know where the conversation's going. When God says, hey, I want you to donate some money to this organization, or I want you to pay tithe, or I want you to support your local church, faith says, sure thing, God, you can provide. You will provide the money. I'm going to give to you. Faith says, okay, God, I'll obey. Okay, God, I'll step out. Okay, God, I'll step up. And when you imagine your life at the very end of your life, and you're old and laying in bed and you got nothing left to give, and you look back on the years of your life, do you want to have seen a life of little faith? All those tiny little things you did for Jesus because you were holding back? Or do you want to see a life of big faith, where whatever Jesus called you to do and whatever he said, you were like, I'm in? You see, the opposite of faith is doubt. And doubt literally means divided. So doubt, I mean, think about like you're at a fork in the road. You're like, I don't know, this way or that way? Ooh, maybe this way, maybe that way. I'm not sure which way I should go. That's doubt. Faith is like a laser focus. You're like, I'm doing this. And maybe you don't know if you're taking this road or that road, but you know God will guide you. So you make a choice and you start moving. And if it's the wrong choice, God will open up a path for you to get to the right choice. Faith, it's the foundation of our fearlessness. Many times, I think I just need to decide to be fearless. I'm just going to decide to be kick butt and courageous, right? But really the choice is, I'm going to trust in God in this situation. I mean, yesterday, we're putting out our book on Amazon, and we hit huge numbers, like bigger than I ever imagined. Over 500 copies were sold in one day. And I'm just like, wowed. But then that same day, I mess up and yell at Libby because she was doing something, and like, so I have this amazing moment of walking on water, and then I have this, embarrassing, terrible moment of not being a great dad. And what God is saying to me, he's saying, hey, little faith, don't doubt. Look up. Trust in me. I've got this. You see, when I look at my success or my failures, I get proud or I get depressed. But when I look at Jesus, I find peace, I find courage, and I find that I can be fearless. And so today I just want to encourage you to look up, to say, God's got this, and then to step out of the boat and walk on water straight to Jesus. God bless.